Admiral James Howard stared at the holographic display floating above his desk at United Defense Force headquarters, his weathered face illuminated by the eerie purple glow of the Zaxxerian transmission. After 30 years in service, he thought he'd seen everything. He was wrong. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice barely masking his disbelief. The AI complied, and the message that would change humanity's place in the galaxy began once more. The image showed a Zaxxerian High Commander, 9 feet of scaled dignity wrapped in ceremonial armor that could probably buy a small continent. But something was wrong. The alien's usually immaculate cranial ridges were dulled with stress, and its quaternary eyes darted nervously off-screen. To the military leadership of Earth, the translation overlay rendered in crisp text. The hesitation before acknowledging Earth's military was telling. Just decades ago, the Zaxxerians had dismissed humanity's entire defense force as quaint museum pieces. "We face an extinction-level threat." The High Commander's translator rendered its clicks and whistles into English, but couldn't hide the tremor in its subharmonics. "Unknown entities are systematically destroying our outer colonies. Our weapons." Another pause, this one laden with shame. "Our weapons only make them stronger." The footage shifted to a military feed. Howard leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. A Zaxxerian battle cruiser, nearly 5 kilometers of advanced alloys and energy weapons, fired its primary antimatter cannon at an invisible target. The beam, capable of cutting a moon in half, simply disappeared into what looked like a tear in space itself. The tear grew larger, its edges rippling with impossible geometries. Then the battle cruiser began to fold. Not explode, not break apart. Fold, like origami in reverse, crushed by forces that shouldn't exist in normal space. The screen filled with emergency broadcasts from across the Zaxxerian Empire. Colonies going dark, fleets vanishing, weapons failing. Howard watched it all, his military mind already racing ahead to implications that chilled him to the bone. Our long-range sensors detected something unexpected. The High Commander continued. During a recent skirmish, a human cargo vessel passed through a combat zone. It's primitive. Its kinetic defense turrets engaged one of these entities. The entity recoiled. Your projectile weapons, which we once mocked, affected it where our energy weapons only fed it. Howard allowed himself a grim smile. Humanity had kept developing ballistic weapons alongside energy weapons precisely because they couldn't afford to put all their eggs in one basket. Now that primitive redundancy might save an empire. "We request." The High Commander's voice cracked, 900 years of imperial superiority crumbling in a single phrase. "We beg for your assistance. Our analysts believe your military technology may be our only hope. We offer full technological exchange, trade rights, and military alliance. Please, help us." The transmission ended, leaving Howard's office in darkness. He reached for his quantum comm, knowing the next few minutes would reshape human history. "Get me the Secretary of Defense. Priority Alpha." And he allowed himself another small smile. "Wake up Captain Morrison. Tell him the Thermopylae has a new mission." Across the solar system, in high orbit above Mars, the UES Thermopylae floated in its maintenance dock. The ship was humanity's newest pride. A perfect fusion of human ingenuity and reversed engineered alien tech. Her hull bristled with railgun batteries alongside more advanced weapons, a compromise that had once drawn sneers from alien military attaches. Now those same weapons might be the galaxy's last hope. In his quarters, Captain Jack Morrison was already awake, reviewing combat footage from the Jupiter confrontation when the call came. As he listened to the briefing, a familiar fire lit in his eyes. They had called him crazy for using 20th century warfare tactics against modern threats. They had laughed at his insistence on maintaining kinetic weapon proficiency alongside energy weapon training. They weren't laughing anymore. And somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, humanity's moment to prove its worth was waiting. The Joint Chiefs sat like stone-faced gargoyles around the Pentagon's secure briefing room, their expressions unreadable as Captain Jack Morrison finished his presentation. Through the reinforced windows, Washington, D.C.'s morning sun cast long shadows across the polished table. "Let me get this straight, Captain." General Rodriguez leaned forward, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. "You want to take our newest warship, with all its experimental tech, straight into the heart of what could be a trap." Morrison stood his ground. At 42, he'd earned his reputation as a maverick, but his results spoke louder than any criticism. "With respect, General, if the Zaxarians wanted to trap us, they wouldn't have sacrificed their pride to do it. They're terrified." Admiral Howard, who'd first received the Zaxarian transmission, nodded slightly. "Show them the Jupiter footage, Jack." The holographic display shifted, showing grainy footage from 3 years ago. The Jupiter confrontation. Morrison's finest hour and biggest controversy. A rogue AI fleet had taken control of the Jupiter defense grid, turning its energy weapons against Earth ships. Traditional tactics had failed miserably. "I ordered all ships to switch to kinetic weapons only," Morrison narrated as the scene played out. "We used 20th century naval warfare techniques, broadsides, crossing the T, even smoke screens created from vaporized asteroid ice. The AI couldn't adapt because its combat algorithms were built around energy weapon encounters." The footage showed the Thermopylae, then fresh from the shipyards, leading a devastatingly effective attack that the history books now studied. Old techniques with new technology. Morrison's specialty. "And you think these same principles will work against these? What are we calling them?" Rodriguez asked. "Void hunters," Morrison replied. "And yes, I do. The Zaxarians' data shows these entities feed on energy weapons, but they either can't detect or can't digest kinetic impacts. The Thermopylae is perfect for this mission because she's a hybrid. We can use her energy weapons as bait while delivering the real damage with our railguns." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's obsolete military doctrine might be the only thing standing between civilization and an incomprehensible threat. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. "There's more," Morrison continued, pulling up the Zaxarian technical data. "Their ships are already designed to interface with our technology. They've been studying us for decades, even while dismissing us publicly. We can deploy immediately without compatibility issues." Admiral Howard stood, his decision made. "The Zaxarians are sending a diplomatic vessel to rendezvous with the Thermopylae at L5. Captain Morrison, you have operational authority. Pick your crew, requisition whatever you need. Just..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Remember that this isn't just a military mission. You're about to become humanity's ambassador to a civilization that suddenly realized they need us more than we need them." Morrison nodded, already mentally preparing for the complexities ahead. "They'll expect us to be grateful for the opportunity, sir. To be eager students of their superior civilization." "And instead?" Rodriguez asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Instead, they're going to learn that sometimes the best path forward is a step backward." Morrison's eyes gleamed with conviction. "We'll save their empire with the very weapons they mocked, but we'll do it our way." As the briefing concluded, Morrison stood at the window, watching the morning traffic below. Somewhere up there, the Thermopylae waited, her hybrid design a testament to humanity's pragmatic approach to progress. They had never abandoned the old ways while embracing the new, never put all their trust in a single technology or doctrine. His comm unit buzzed. The crew manifests were ready for review. The best of Earth's forces, trained in both ancient tactics and bleeding-edge technology. They would teach the Zaxarians that true advancement wasn't about abandoning the past, but building upon it. The fate of an empire would rest on that lesson. And Captain Jack Morrison intended to be one hell of a teacher. Multiple contacts, dimensional fractures forming. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes' voice cut through the bridge's tense atmosphere as the Thermopylae dropped out of hyperspace. "Sir, they're... Jesus Christ. Captain Morrison understood her reaction. No briefing could have prepared them for this. The Zaxarian colony world of Nexus VI burned before them, its atmosphere torn by writhing tears in reality itself. The planet's 3 moons had already been reduced to debris fields, their fragments spinning in impossible patterns around invisible gravitational centers. "Talk to me, people. What are we seeing?" Morrison's steady voice anchored his crew as they processed the nightmare before them. "Sir, Zaxarian destroyer group engaging hostiles at bearing 34 Mark II, Tactical Officer James Chen reported. Their energy weapons, confirmed, sir. The entities are absorbing the attacks and growing larger." Through the main viewport, Morrison watched a Zaxarian warship, sleek, beautiful, and doomed, fire its primary antimatter cannon at one of the spatial tiers. The beam disappeared into the void, and the tear expanded like a hungry maw. The destroyer tried to retreat, but space itself seemed to fold around it. Metal screamed as the million-ton vessel crumpled like aluminum foil. "Captain." A new voice, the Zaxarian liaison officer assigned to their ship. Commander Vexterra's scales had paled to an almost white shade. "Our remaining ships request immediate assistance. They've lost 3 vessels already." Morrison's mind raced, analyzing the situation with the same unconventional thinking that had saved Earth during the Jupiter confrontation. "Hayes, give me a gravitational map of the battle space. Chen, plot firing solutions for all railgun batteries, but do not power up energy weapons." The holographic display showed the truth. The Void Hunters weren't random in their attacks. They were hurting the Zaxarian ships, using their own panic against them. "Sir." Chen's fingers danced across his console. "Main railgun batteries show ready. But at this range." "We're not going to shoot where they are," Morrison interrupted, a plan forming. "We're going to shoot where they're going to be." "Hayes, do we have enough data to predict their movement patterns?" "Yes, sir. They're following gravitational waves, using the Zaxarian energy weapons as guideposts. I'm feeding the pattern to tactical now." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. "Chen, calculate impact points accounting for gravitational distortion. All batteries, load tungsten core penetrators. Let's show these interdimensional bastards what primitive warfare can do." The Thermopila's railgun batteries tracked in perfect synchronization. The ship itself seemed to hold its breath. Fire. 20 tungsten rods, each accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, streaked across space. They flew true, unaffected by the energy-based distortions that scattered Zaxarian weapons fire. The first Void Hunter never saw it coming. The kinetic impact struck home, and for the first time, the humans heard the enemy's voice, a shriek that existed somewhere between sound and thought, between pain and surprise. Direct hit. Chen's excitement was palpable. Entity showing signs of, "Sir, it's bleeding." Some kind of fourth-dimensional fluid, but we heard it. Morrison was already moving to the next phase. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Switch to kinetic weapons only. I repeat, kinetic weapons only. Follow our targeting solutions." The Zaxarian ships, desperate enough to try anything, complied. Space filled with railgun fire and mass driver rounds. The Void Hunters, faced with weapons they couldn't absorb or deflect, began to retreat. "They're running," Vexterra whispered, all 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "By the Empire's eternal light, you've driven them back." Morrison watched as the spatial tiers began to seal themselves, the impossible geometries fading back into normal space. "Lieutenant Hayes, begin damage assessment of the colony." Chen, maintain defensive formation. These things might come back for round 2. As his crew carried out their orders, Morrison studied the battlefield. They'd won their first engagement, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Void Hunters would adapt, learn. But now they knew something crucial. These creatures could be hurt, could be killed. Humanity's primitive weapons had just changed the rules of engagement, and Jack Morrison intended to press that advantage for all it was worth. The Thermopila's science lab hummed with activity as holographic models of the Void Hunters floated above the central conference table. Human and Zaxxarian scientists worked side by side, their previous cultural barriers forgotten in the face of existential threat. "Play it again," Morrison ordered, watching the footage from their recent battle. "Focus on the moment of impact." Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the ship's chief xenophysicist, manipulated the hologram. The image zoomed in on a tungsten rod striking one of the entities. "There, Captain. Watch the dimensional ripple." The assembled team watched as the projectile pierced what appeared to be empty space, causing a cascade of fourth-dimensional fluid to spray outward. Vexterra's scientific advisor, master theorist Kittel, clicked his mandibles in excitement. "Fascinating. The kinetic impact creates a localized dimensional anchor point. Your projectiles aren't just hitting them. They're forcing them to partially manifest in our reality." Morrison leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Explain it to a career military man, Doctor." Rodriguez stepped forward, her dark eyes bright with revelation. "Think of it like this, Captain. These creatures exist primarily in four-dimensional space. Energy weapons, plasma, antimatter, even standard lasers are essentially food to them. They can absorb and metabolize any form of energy we throw at them, but not physical objects." Morrison finished, beginning to understand. "Exactly." Kittel's scales rippled with academic excitement. "Your projectiles force a quantum interaction they can't avoid. In trying to digest or deflect the kinetic impact, they must partially manifest in our dimension. And when they do, they become vulnerable." Morrison nodded. "That's why they screamed when we hit them. They actually felt pain." Dr. Rodriguez pulled up new data streams from the battle. "But there's more, Captain. Look at their movement patterns before and after we engage. They're not random at all. They're following specific electromagnetic and gravitational gradients. The Zaxxarian energy weapons act like a dinner bell, drawing them in from whatever dimension they inhabit." Kittel's humility was evident as he added, "Our empire's military advancement ironically made us perfect prey. Every defense station, every patrol ship, every colony's energy shield. We might as well have been broadcasting an all-you-can-eat buffet signal across dimensions." Morrison stood, pacing as he processed the implications. "So they're attracted to energy signatures, but vulnerable to physical impacts. Dr. Rodriguez, could we use this? Create some kind of trap? Already modeling it." "Sir." She brought up a new simulation. "If we use Zaxxarian energy weapons as bait, but surround the target area with kinetic weapon platforms, we could turn their hunting grounds into killing zones." Morrison finished, a predatory smile forming. "How quickly can we modify existing Zaxxarian defense platforms to mount our railgun technology?" Cull consulted his datapad. "With both our engineering teams working together, perhaps 3 standard days per platform. The real challenge will be training our crews to effectively use kinetic weapons. We haven't done ballistic calculations in combat for 9 centuries. "Yes, you've mentioned that," Morrison interrupted, not unkindly. "Start with the basics. Gravity wells, trajectory calculations, lead time on moving targets. We'll have you thinking like 20th century naval gunners in no time." As if to underscore the urgency of their work, the ship's sensors detected a new dimensional tear forming at the edge of the system. This one was larger than any they'd seen before. "They're learning," Rodriguez whispered, watching the readings. "This one's different, more structured. They're adapting to our presence." Morrison's jaw set with determination. "Then we adapt faster. Kittel, get your best engineers up to speed on our weapon systems. Dr. Rodriguez, I want a full tactical analysis of their dimensional transition points. If they're going to evolve their hunting strategies, we need to be ready." As the scientists rushed to their tasks, Morrison studied the holographic model of their enemy. Humanity had spent centuries being dismissed as technological primitives by the Galactic community. Now those same primitive principles might be the key to saving civilization itself. The hunter had become the hunted, and Captain Jack Morrison intended to teach these interdimensional predators why humanity had never fully abandoned the art of kinetic warfare. The holographic war room aboard the Thermopylae crackled with tension as Morrison faced down 36 Zaxxarian fleet commanders. Their scaled faces showed various shades of purple, the alien equivalent of furious blushing. Absolutely not. Fleet Master Caxter slammed his ceremonial staff against the deck. You expect us to use our capital ships as bait. Morrison kept his voice level, though his patience was wearing thin. That's exactly what I expect. Your ships are already attracting them. We might as well use that to our advantage. The tactical display between them showed his plan in detail. Zaxxarian warships arranged in a complex pattern, their energy signatures deliberately amplified to draw the Void Hunters in. Surrounding them, hidden in the gravitational shadow of nearby moons and asteroid fields, dozens of newly modified defense platforms bristled with human railgun technology. The 7th Fleet alone represents 3 centuries of technological advancement. Another commander hissed, "We cannot risk. Your fleet will be dead in 3 days if we don't act now." Morrison cut in, bringing up the latest sensor data. The Void Hunters are massing at these coordinates. This isn't a random attack pattern anymore. They're organizing, evolving. Lieutenant Hayes, manning the tactical station, spoke up. New contact. Dimensional tear forming in Sector 7. Morrison seized the moment. "Watch," he ordered the Zaxxarian commanders. On screen, a massive tear in space-time opened, larger than any they'd seen before. 3 Zaxxarian patrol ships, ignoring the new protocols, opened fire with energy weapons. The results were catastrophic. The tear expanded exponentially, absorbing the energy and spawning smaller tiers around it. Within moments, 2 of the patrol ships were gone, crushed into dimensional singularities. That, Morrison said into the stunned silence, is what happens if we don't change our tactics. Now, would you like to hear the rest of my plan? The mood in the room shifted. Even Caxter's scales had paled to a lighter shade. "Proceed, Captain Morrison," the fleet master said quietly. Morrison manipulated the tactical display, showing the intricate dance he choreographed. "We position your ships here, here, and here. Energy weapons powered but not firing. When the Void Hunters manifest, you'll pulse your engines and weapons in this specific pattern. We're essentially ringing the dinner bell." The display showed waves of gravitational distortion, creating a complex interference pattern. They'll follow these energy gradients, thinking they're herding you into a trap. Instead, he pressed a control, and hundreds of hidden weapons platforms lit up in the display. They'll be entering our kill box. Railguns, mass drivers, and kinetic torpedo launchers, all coordinated by your fleet's superior targeting computers. We'll hit them from every angle with weapons they can't absorb or deflect. "And our ships?" a younger commander asked. "The energy signatures will make us prime targets." Morrison allowed himself a slight smile. "That's where the human element comes in. We've modified your shields to create localized gravitational lenses. When the Void Hunters commit to their attack run, your ships will seem to be where they aren't. Old submariner tactics. We're giving them false sonar readings, just with gravity instead of sound." The tactical display showed the full battle plan in motion. It was beautiful in its complexity, combining Zaxxarian technological precision with human strategic deception. "By the Empire," Caxter whispered, "it's brilliant. Primitive, but brilliant." "I'll take that as a compliment," Morrison replied dryly. "Now we have 18 hours to get your crews trained on the new protocols. Lieutenant Hayes will." Multiple contacts. Hayes' voice cut through the room. "Sir, they're not waiting. I'm tracking 17-dimensional tiers forming in a perfect containment pattern around the colony." Morrison's eyes hardened. "Then we do this now." "Fleet Master." Caxter drew himself up to his full height. "The Zaxxarian Empire stands ready, Captain Morrison. We will follow your lead." "Good." Morrison turned to his tactical officer. "Sound battle stations. All ships. Implement pattern Morrison 7. Let's show these interdimensional bastards what happens when humanity and the Zaxarian Empire fight as one." The Thermopyla's battle klaxon began to wail. Humanity's greatest gambit was about to begin. "Adjust your targeting 3 degrees starboard. Account for gravitational drift. And fire." The training simulation blazed as young Zaxarian weapons officer Tix Era executed a perfect kinetic strike, her tungsten round threading through a complex gravitational field to strike the virtual Void Hunter. The creature's simulated death scream echoed through the Thermopyla's combat training deck. "Outstanding." Morrison nodded, watching the alien officer's scales flush with pride. "You're thinking in 4 dimensions while shooting in 3. Exactly what we need." The past week had transformed the Thermopyla's interior. Every available space had been converted into training areas. Zaxarian officers, who once commanded ships that could slice moons in half, now hunched over ancient ballistics tables and trajectory calculators. "I still don't understand something, Captain," Tix Era said, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep thought in her species. "These calculations, our combat computers could perform them instantly." Morrison smiled, remembering similar conversations from his own training days. "Run the simulation again, but this time I'll shut down your targeting computer halfway through." She complied. The scenario began. A Void Hunter, moving erratically through space-time. Tixera's fingers flew over the controls, her shot lined up perfectly. Then Morrison killed the computer. "Now what?" he asked as she froze. I can't. The calculations." "But you can." Morrison stepped closer to the console. "What's the target's speed?" "0.3 light, varying. Gravitational distortion. 7% positive shift, oscillating." "You know everything you need to know," Morrison said quietly. "Stop trying to be perfect. Trust your instincts, like your ancestors did before computers, like mine did on Earth's oceans." Tixera's secondary eyes narrowed. Then she fired. The round struck the Void Hunter dead center. "How?" she whispered. "Because sometimes the old ways work better than the new. Computers can be fooled, jammed, or destroyed. But this," he tapped his temple, "this is always with you." Across the deck, similar scenes played out. Human instructors teaching Zaxarian crews the art of kinetic warfare. The proud aliens had swallowed their pride after the success of Morrison's first coordinated defense, which had saved 3 colony worlds in a single engagement. Lieutenant Hayes approached, her tablet displaying fresh intelligence. "Sir, the Void Hunters are changing tactics again. They're targeting our supply lines now, trying to isolate the modified defense platforms." Morrison studied the data. The enemy was adapting faster than expected, showing signs of collective intelligence. But so were the combined human-Zaxarian forces. "Show me the latest combat footage from the Helios sector," he ordered. The main screen lit up with a recent battle. A Zaxarian destroyer, its energy weapons powered but silent, played bait for a cluster of Void Hunters. As the creatures moved to attack, perfectly hidden rail platforms opened up from behind a debris field. The kinetic barrage was devastating. "They're learning," Hayes noted with pride. That destroyer captain used a 20th century destroyer tactic, showing the wounded flank to draw in the enemy. "The student becomes the master," Morrison mused, then turned back to Tixera, ready for something more challenging. The young officer straightened, her scales shifting to a confident blue hue. "Yes, sir. Show me more of these. What did you call them?" "Wolf pack tactics." Morrison expanded the simulation to include multiple targets and friendly ships. As he began explaining the intricacies of coordinated kinetic strikes, he caught sight of Fleet Master Caxter watching from the observation deck. The old Zaxarian's expression was unreadable, but his formal military sash now bore a new addition, a small Earth Navy insignia. "Sir," Hayes interrupted softly. "New reports from the frontier. The modified defense grid at Colony 7 just repelled an attack. No casualties. The Zaxarian crew handled it entirely on their own. Morrison felt a surge of pride. They weren't just teaching tactics anymore. They were bridging centuries of technological and cultural divide. The Void Hunters had meant to prey on an empire. Instead, they had forced the creation of something unprecedented, a true fusion of human and Zaxarian military doctrine. And they were about to learn just how dangerous that combination could be. Multiple dimensional ruptures detected. They're trying to surround us. Morrison stood on the Thermopyla's bridge, watching as space itself tore open around his battle group. The Void Hunters had finally taken the bait and brought an army. "Status report," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on the tactical display. 37 primary ruptures, sir, Hayes reported, her fingers dancing across her console. Largest concentration we've ever seen. They're coordinating, forming a sphere around our position. The combined human Zaxarian fleet hung in space, appearing vulnerable. 6 Zaxarian capital ships, their energy cores pulsing like wounded prey, surrounded the Thermopyla. Hidden among the debris field of a shattered moon, 200 modified defense platforms waited silently. "Right into our trap," Morrison murmured. Then louder, "Signal the fleet. Execute Operation Thunderbolt." The Zaxarian ships began their dance, their energy signatures pulsing in complex patterns designed to draw the Void Hunters closer. On the bridge of the Lid Zaxarian dreadnought, Fleet Master Caxter's voice came through clear and confident. "All ships, maintain formation. Remember your training. These creatures think they're the hunters." His mandibles clicked in what humans now recognized as anticipation. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The Void Hunters struck with devastating coordination. Reality buckled as they attempted to fold space around the fleet. But this time, something was different. Gravitational lenses holding. Lieutenant Chen reported from Tactical. "They're seeing our ghost signatures exactly where we want them." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. "All ships, execute scatter pattern Delta. Weapons platforms, stand by." The fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible weeks ago. Each ship projected false energy signatures, creating a three-dimensional web of deception. The Void Hunters, eager to feast, swept in toward the phantom signals. "They're committed," Hayes announced. "All targets within the kill box." Morrison's voice cut through the tension. "All platforms, weapons free. Fire at will." Space erupted with kinetic fury. 200 railgun platforms opened fire simultaneously, their tungsten rounds accelerated to relativistic speeds. The Void Hunters, caught in multiple crossing fields of fire, screamed in that bone-chilling frequency between dimensions. Direct hits across all sectors. Chen's excitement was palpable. They're trying to phase shift, but the gravitational disruption fields are holding them in normal space. Morrison watched as the combined fleet executed their attack with ruthless efficiency. Zaxarian ships, now equipped with human kinetic weapons, demonstrated their superior targeting systems. Void Hunters died by the dozens, their fourth-dimensional fluid spreading like dark stars across the battlefield. "Sir," Hayes' voice carried a note of warning. "The remaining entities are attempting something new. Energy readings off the scale." The tactical display showed the truth. The surviving Void Hunters were merging, combining into something massive. Space curved obscenely around the Gestalt entity as it grew. "All ships, fall back to secondary positions," Morrison ordered. Then, "Caxter, are you seeing this?" "Indeed, Captain." The Zaxarian commander's voice was steady. "Shall we show them our final surprise?" Morrison nodded. "All ships, execute Maneuver Morrison 9. Deploy the gravity bombs." The fleet scattered in perfect formation as modified probes launched from their holds. Each probe contained a minute amount of dark matter, combined with Zaxarian gravity manipulation technology, a weapon conceived by human ingenuity and built with alien precision. The merged entity lunged for the nearest energy signature, only to have space itself turn against it. The gravity bombs detonated in sequence, creating a cascade of localized gravity wells. The creature, too massive to escape, was torn apart by the same fundamental forces it had once manipulated. Target destroyed, Chen reported as the sensor readings returned to normal. Confirming. All hostile entities eliminated. The system is clear. A cheer went up across the fleet's comm channels. Human and Zaxarian voices united in victory, but Morrison's expression remained focused. Send word to command, he ordered Hayes. The offensive strategy works. Tell them to begin mass production of the defense platforms. We're taking this show on the road. As the fleet regrouped, Morrison studied the battlefield. They had won this round decisively, but he knew the war was far from over. The Void Hunters would adapt again, grow stronger. But now so would they. Together. 3 months after the Battle of Shattered Moon, Captain Jack Morrison stood at attention in the Grand Hall of the Zaxarian High Command. The vast chamber, with its crystal spires and gravity-defying architecture, now displayed something unprecedented: Earth military insignias alongside ancient Zaxarian battle flags. The combined fleets report another successful operation in the Carina sector. Fleet Master Caxtur announced to the assembled dignitaries. The Void Hunter incursions have been reduced by 87% across all defended systems. Morrison watched as the tactical display showed the transformed state of the Empire. Thousands of defense platforms, merging human and Zaxarian technology, created an interlocking network of protection. Joint patrol groups moved with practiced precision, their crews no longer divided by species or doctrine. Who would have thought? A familiar voice said beside him. Tixara, now wearing the rank insignias of both Earth and the Empire, approached with a datapad. That our salvation would come from weapons we once considered museum pieces. Morrison smiled at his former student, now one of the most respected tactical officers in the combined fleet. Sometimes the old ways work best. How's the new training program proceeding? Exceptionally well, she replied, her scales shifting to proud blues and greens. The latest class of cadets starts with basic ballistic calculations before even touching energy weapons. They're calling it the Morrison Doctrine now, you know. Before Morrison could respond, the chamber's massive doors opened to admit High Commander Vexterra, now the Empire's supreme military leader. The tall Zaxarian's ceremonial armor bore both the ancient symbols of his office and a newly forged Earth Fleet medallion. Captain Morrison, his translator rendered in crisp tones, stepped forward. As Morrison approached the raised platform, he noted how much had changed. Where once there had been barely concealed disdain for primitive humans, now there was genuine respect in the assembled aliens' eyes. 3 standard months ago, Vexterra began. Our empire faced extinction. Our technology, the pride of 9 centuries, had become our greatest weakness. We were a civilization that had forgotten its roots, that had mistaken advancement for abandonment of the past. The High Commander's secondary eyes fixed on Morrison. You taught us differently, not just about warfare, but about progress itself. True advancement doesn't mean discarding the old. It means building upon it, understanding when each tool, each technique, has its place. Morrison stood straight as Vexterra lifted an ornate staff, the same one that had once been slammed in protest against his tactical proposals. By unanimous decree of the Imperial Council and the Earth Defense Force, we hereby establish the Combined Fleet Academy. Every warship in our empire will carry both energy and kinetic weapons. Every officer will learn both ancient and modern tactics. And you, Captain Morrison, will serve as its first commandant. The announcement sent a ripple through the chamber. Such an appointment was unprecedented. No human had ever held such high rank in the Empire's military structure. Thank you, High Commander, Morrison said carefully. But my place is on the Thermopylae. Is it? Vexterra's mandibles clicked in what Morrison now recognized as amusement. Look around you, Captain. The Thermopylae was just the beginning. Every ship in the fleet now carries her DNA. Every crew trains in her methods. You've built something far larger than one ship. You've created a legacy that will protect both our civilizations for generations to come." Morrison glanced at his former students, at the proud faces both human and Zaxxarian. He saw Caxter nodding in approval, Hayes beaming with pride, and hundreds of officers wearing the combined insignias of both species. "Very well," he said finally. "I accept." As the chamber erupted in approval, Morrison's thoughts drifted to those first desperate days. They had not just defeated an enemy, they had forged something new. A military doctrine that respected both the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. A partnership that proved true strength lay not in technological superiority, but in the willingness to learn from each other. The Void Hunters had sought to devour an empire. Instead, they had birthed an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. And somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, any threat that dared to challenge this combined might would learn a crucial lesson. Never underestimate the power of primitive warfare, especially when wielded by those wise enough to combine it with the technology of the future.